Hello everyone, this is Heroes Trivia, and welcome back to another episode of the Zhuge Liang Northern Expedition lore series as we continue with episode 13, titled A Sudden Recall. Now in our previous episode, we ended with the Battle of Lucheng, where Zhuge Liang crushed Sima Yi in their first ever meeting. However, we also mentioned that the count of this battle will vary wildly depending on which historical source you refer to. For if you read the Book of Jin, which is one of the official 24 historical texts on Chinese history, it will actually state that the Battle of Lucheng was won by Sima Yi, as the Wei forces chased the Shu Han army out of Lucheng while eliminating more than 10,000 troops. This account, however, is definitively false, as if this had been the case, then the siege on Mount Qi Castle would have been lifted regardless of the outcome of Zheng He's attempt, as Zhuge Liang would have pulled Wang Ping from the siege, and the entire 4th Northern Expedition would have ended in failure right there. But the 4th Northern Expedition did not end after the Battle of Lucheng, which took place in May of 231, as we have clear historical records from all sides stating that the final battle for the 4th Northern Expedition would actually take place in late June, early July of 231 at a narrow mountain path called Mumen, where a retreating Shu Han force ambushed the pursuing Wei army. And if we just look at the map here, if Sima Yi had been victorious at the Battle of Lucheng and chased Zhuge Liang out of Lucheng and killed over 10,000 Shu Han soldiers, then how did the Shu Han forces end up back at Shangbang just a month later, since the Shu Han forces had to advance rather than retreat after the Battle of Lucheng, for them to be even retreating from a position north of Lucheng in 2-month time? So clearly the Book of Jin is lying, which is not surprising, as the primary source for the Book of Jin comes from court documents during the Jin dynasty itself, and no court historian would dare to speak ill of Sima Yi, who is the founding father of the dynasty. However, before we dismiss the Book of Jin entirely as a historical source, I do want to state that while the Book of Jin does contain many inaccuracies revolving around the lives of the imperial Sima clan, it is still an invaluable historical text that contains many details covering the state of the late Han and Three Kingdoms economy, as well as intricate details involving the nomadic political states of the 16 Kingdom period, which are both revolutionary for Chinese historical texts up till this point, as texts before this never really had full chapters covering the state of the economy or details about nomadic state politics. But back to the topic at hand, we now know for a fact that Sima Yi was soundly defeated by Zhuge Liang at the Battle of Lucheng, which would have a profound impact on how Sima Yi will approach future engagements with Zhuge Liang, as he will never again in his lifetime offer Zhuge Liang an open field battle. And the fear and respect for Zhuge Liang's ability to drill and train infantry will go so far that even Sima Yi's son, Sima Zhao, would eventually use Zhuge Liang's infantry training manuals, which were acquired after the defeat of the Kingdom of Shu Han, as the official training manuals for the Jin Imperial Palace Guards. Now, with the heavy losses suffered at the Battle of Lucheng and the already struggling food supply situation at hand, Sima Yi was forced to retreat all the way back to Shangbang, with Zhuge Liang in hot pursuit, as Shangbang was most likely put under siege in early June of 231, even though we do not have a historical source to confirm this. Yet just when victory was in sight for Zhuge Liang, an edict would arrive from Hanzhong stating that the food supplies had run out, and that Shu Han forces were now ordered back on the command of the emperor himself. Frustrated, but dutiful to the emperor, Zhuge Liang ordered the Shu Han forces to retreat back to Hanzhong, giving up all the gains from yet another wasted campaign. Now, in Romance of the Three Kingdoms novel, this retreat edict was from Emperor Liu Shan, after he was influenced by a corrupt eunuch named Huang Hao. But historically, for the 4th Northern Expedition, this story would be far too early, as Huang Hao would eventually become a corrupt and influential eunuch within the Shuhan court, but his rise to power would not be until 27 years later in 258. And the main target of his meddling in military affairs would be Zhuge Liang's protege, Jiang Wei, during his many northern expeditions. Historically, in this period, Zhuge Liang was keenly aware of the potential danger of overreaching eunuchs and had left behind 3 trusted advisors in Jiang Wan, Fei Yi, and Dong Yun to guide the young emperor, as these 3 will become prime ministers after Zhuge Liang's death in the future. And together, they were able to manage the court affairs soundly while Zhuge Liang was away on his northern expedition for the past 4 years, as Zhuge Liang has not returned from Hanzhong ever since he set out for the first expedition. So if the imperial edict was not from Liu Shan, then who sent it? Well, the answer would be Li Yan, who was a fellow co-regent with Zhuge Liang. And if you remember, Li Yan had been summoned by Zhuge Liang just a year prior to march from the eastern borders with Wu in the Jiang province to reinforce Hanzhong with his 20,000 reserve troops when Cao Zhen first launched his ambitious 3-pronged counterattack. At that time, Li Yan resisted the summon as he wanted to remain semi-autonomous in the Jiang province, but after being enticed with a director of the Jiang province position for his son, Li Feng, Li Yan half-heartedly marched his forces into Hanzhong. Now, fortunately for Li Yan, his troops were not needed, as Cao Zhen would eventually be stopped by the elements. But since he had already marched all the way into Hanzhong, Zhuge Liang decided to keep him around, as Li Yan was given command of Hanzhong during the 4th Northern Expedition. Now, we previously discussed the 3 separate political cliques within the Kingdom of Shuhan, divided between the native Yi province gentry clans, the Dongzhou refugees, who would eventually become the main group that supported Liu Yan and then Liu Zhang, and finally Liu Bei's Jin province transplants, now led by Zhuge Liang. Then after Liu Bei's death, he made Zhuge Liang and Li Yan co-regents, and on paper at least, Li Yan and Zhuge Liang were equals. But as with most co-regent setups, sharing power is never straightforward, especially as Zhuge Liang dominated both court politics and the military, with the blessing and the support of Emperor Liu Shan, who saw Zhuge Liang as an uncle. So for a long period of time, suppressed by Zhuge Liang's dominance, Li Yan became quite content with his role as a prefect of this safe eastern province in Jiangzhou, as he shifted his personal ambitions from politics towards simply enriching his own clan. But wealth and comfort also breed greed and ineptitude, as Li Yan became simply incapable of the task of running Hanzhong and transporting adequate supplies to help sustain the northern expedition. So when another rainy summer season hit and supplies became slow on the road, instead of stepping up the transport operation, Li Yan opted for trickery and deflection of blame, as he would eventually have the director of salt mining, Can Shu, deliver a falsified imperial edict to Zhuge Liang to recall the army, while at the same time, Li Yan put plans into action to assassinate Can Shu as a means to silence the messenger, which would help clear his own name once Zhuge Liang does return to Hanzhong and realize that the supplies are there, but just slowly being transported to the front. And with that, our episode here comes to an end, as Li Yan's inability and dishonesty ends yet another northern expedition for Zhuge Liang. But fortunately, Sima Yi will send one more present to Zhuge Liang before the retreat completes, as we'll come back here next time to cover the ill-advised pursuit of Zhang He and the ambush at Mumen. So hopefully you all enjoyed this episode enough to hit that like button to help support the channel, and I'll see you all next time. Bye!